Thank you all so much for tuning in for this special series at Built Tech Week. I'm here with Paul Doherty. You are founder and chairman of the Digit Group, correct?
That's correct.
And tell me more about the Digit Group.
Well, we're a real estate development company, but an unusual one in that I'm a designer, licensed architect, but I'm also a builder, where we have grown over the years of our use of technology as a lead to now being a data-centric way of driving the industry through human-centric design. What that really means with all the fancy words, we know how to build buildings, we know how to build infrastructure, and we've now been thrust into this world of not just creating buildings and, let's say, campuses and things like that, but entire cities from scratch.
Wow.
So it involves not just technology, it involves everything from socioeconomic studies to culture to, we even have on staff a cultural anthropologist, just to make sure that when we start to design our cities, we're focused in on how the technology can transform certain ways of living, learning, being able to play and work in very unique environments. But my challenge is this: there's not a lot of new cities going up. We actually own the majority of them around the world, mostly in Asia and the Middle East. But our challenge is that I need to have people fall in love with a piece of dirt. Because we're not talking about cities that grow over centuries. Mm-hmm. These are pop-up cities meant to be something that provides a very unique experience that we want people to feel comfortable enough to move their families.
Wow.
Where it's a place where they can learn better, where they have better health care, where there's measurable improvements of quality of life. What's interesting about doing these new cities, though, is that a lot of the offshoots of these innovations that we bring to market are now being boomeranged back into existing cities. And that's where I think the special sauce is. And that's what the Digit Group does. We're in a very unique place in the world right now.
Let's talk about that special sauce that is being boomeranged back into cities. What does that look like?
Well, there's a lot of talk about individual pieces of innovation. The world of autonomous vehicles, the world of new energy, new ways of looking at water and how to manage those things. As individual components, they're really important to certain cities. But to other cities, there may be a different priority. So our job is not to go in with just one, silver bullet. It's to go in and look at the way that we can start to marry a lot of these different innovations together, be it a process, be it a product, be it a piece of software, so that we create recipes. It's almost like being a chef, right? Innovations are our ingredients, but those recipes are going to be very special. We actually call our playbooks a cookbook.
I love it.
Yeah.
The concept of an anthropologist, can you give us some insight into how that has helped to shape cities, the pop-up cities, in a differentiated way?
Sure. So a lot of cities, let's take the Waterfront District in Toronto right now. It is owned by Quad Real, the largest real estate development firm in Canada. It is a very special place because it's a transformative place that people can recognize. It's right on the water. It is a potentially a high value site. What was interesting is that Google came in and put a bid in for a piece of that waterfront, and that waterfront area right now is being controlled by one of their offshoots called Sidewalk Labs, run by Dan Doctoroff, a really good guy, former CEO of Bloomberg, former deputy mayor of New York City. He knows what he's doing. But here's a problem. So everyone was all excited, right? Hey, we're going to have a smart city in Toronto and we can learn from that. They've done three things really interestingly wrong. One is that they're trying to do too much in such a tight space that everything you've ever heard about smart cities, they're trying to shove into this thing instead of letting it breathe. That's going to be an interesting experiment after they showed off what they're going to do in August, because the experiment right now, people are starting to question, going, that's a lot of stuff in this little space, and a lot of it has to do with you capturing my data. So problem number two is that they're having protests in Toronto over why Google is calling themselves camouflaged Sidewalk Labs, and what are you going to do with my data? Privacy. The Canadians are the most docile people on the planet. They're wonderful.
They are wonderful.
The only thing that they ever protest is if they run out of beer at a hockey game. So to have them come up and have signs saying, we don't want this, that's a huge thing, which comes to number three. We take a strong look at that and what's happened with Facebook, with selling off to third-party groups with our information,
Yep.
that data is going to be the most important element for how the built environment, specifically how design and construction is going to be used in the future. Because what we're doing right now with BIM and all these wonderful tools is that we're capturing enough information to create the static world, people calling a digital twin. What's going to be interesting is how do the architects, the engineers, contractors, subs then start to learn from themselves on a job site as they're being tracked? What happens when a trade goes in and we capture that data and we see work in place, which is a really good measure of and how we use that data for things like facility management and extend the value of what you're doing in the industry. But here's the problem, privacy issues now, right? So how we get in front of that, we look at the cultural anthropology of how to get in front of what do you do with the data?
Right.
How can you start to storytell before it becomes an issue? To say, listen, yes, we're going to capture these pieces of information, and yes, this is how we're going to protect it, and look at what it's going to do. So when you take a look at newer technologies that are being developed as algorithms, such as one of the ways of doing that is through blockchain, we now have a trusted element that can then protect people, that it should never be a company like Sidewalk Labs or Google that should be controlling people's data. It should be in the public realm managed by the cities themselves. Now here's the problem. Who in the city is going to manage this? So yeah, these are the stories of our times. People are all talking about IoT and big data and BIM here at this conference and everything else. It's going to come down to how we best identify two things, human capital and more importantly, social capital. Right now in China, we have a big issue going on where we are right now working, well, we have two projects coming up out of the ground, shovels in the ground right now. For cities, one city's for about 360,000 people. My largest project's one for 12 million people that has to be done in 5 years.
Oh my gosh.
Now, what we're doing there is creating an environment where we do collect data of individuals. But back in May, the central government of China created a brand new policy and program that's called the Social Scorecard. For every citizen, all 1.4 billion people now are in a system that says if we see you doing things, physically like jaywalking, if we see you, cheating on a test at school, if we see you saying negative things in social media, your scorecard goes down. And if you hit a certain level, you're restricted of travel, how you and where you can work, the type of healthcare, the type of education you can get. This is like that one episode of that UK Twilight Zone-ish type of TV show called Black Mirror.
Yeah.
It's real.
Big Brother.
So now here's the question to the construction industry. We are the masters at static data and capturing that. We now have to be more aware that it's not about the individual building that's coming up out of the ground. You're supposed to do that right. We have a higher calling now and a higher responsibility, and that is the kinetic data. What do you do when you're trying to build a city and you have autonomous vehicles? They need to be, that's kinetic energy, they need to work with the buildings because those are digital corridors that they can guide themselves through. Not the crap that Tesla and Uber are using today. That technology is it's 20 years old. Some of it's not even mature, and they're killing people, literally killing people.
Yeah.
So we have a higher responsibility as an industry to say, let's talk, let's collide industries, transportation, energy, water, retail, education, healthcare. That's our responsibility because when we're creating these buildings, we're creating the environments for those things to happen, and we should have a say.
I mean, there are some people you sit down and you talk to, and you're like, I would just like to, no offense, lock you in a room with me and just brain dump, like download all that's in your brain and put it in mine because it's fascinating. You have such a unique insight into this industry, both current and future. And Paul is just one example of the amazing people that you'll get to interact with here at Built Tech Week. Paul, where do you draw inspiration? Where do you feel the excitement that I feel from sitting here with you?
Oh, kids.
Kids?
I have an 8-year-old boy.
Oh, I have a 9-year-old son.
So
yeah.
You get it.
I totally get it.
They are Roblox, Fortnite, Minecraft. That's their world.
That's their world.
And I'm not creating these cities because these are 15-year build-outs. I mean, some are going to be short, like in China with the 5-year build out, which I used to have hair, thank you. But now, when we're doing 15-year build outs, we're not building the cities for us. What we're doing is we need to have that legacy passed down. I watch my son now interact just as easy as knocking on the door with his friend down the street, where they go up on Roblox and they're a team.
Yeah.
And they're interacting, and he's asking how to spell certain words, and it's like, wow, they are the first generation where the cyber-physical relationship is one. It's the fourth age of the Industrial Revolution, and we're sitting right on top of it. So my inspiration is when I'm sitting there and I'm thinking I'm doing a really good job, and I'm doing something on my laptop, and my son comes over, and I go, hey, Daniel, come over and just sit in my lap. What do you think? And he goes, eh? I'm like, what do you mean, eh? He goes, so what? And he walks away. I'm going, you know what? He's right. I just spent 8 hours working on something I thought was totally cool, and I'm a dork. So, so my inspiration's from kids.
Out of the mouth of babes. You are so right. I can't give my son too much credit, because then he gets to think like, oh, I'm a big deal. Yeah, no. We've got plenty of time for that. Paul Doherty, how do you prefer to connect with people? Is it LinkedIn, Twitter, people go visiting your website?
All the above. I think social media is a great way of starting the process of a conversation. You can imagine with the amount of work that we're doing, we have a tremendous amount of people that love what we're trying to do. So they're always saying, how do we work with you? How do I work for you? Really what it comes down to is storytelling. We've been fortunate enough to gain the respect and the trust of the White House, both the Obama and the current administration, central government in Beijing, the royal family in Saudi, and elsewhere, the government of Canada. And to gain that trust, we have to have a constant conversation. And I would suggest that to anyone wanting to be in touch with what we do as well. It's not about resumes and this is what I can do. That's a piece of it. But having a conversation and getting that trust is really about alignment. And that's what we found about trying to have our vocabulary, our taxonomy change in order to talk with President Xi over in China or President Trump at the White House, in order to align what we're trying to do so that it benefits things that are beyond political and geographic. A case, for instance, when we're dealing with innovation, the United States of America has such a tremendous amount of great talent, and it's because we take it from all over the world. I mean, it's obvious. There's going to be no one that ever comes close to what we do with innovation and spirited thinking. Problem is, the inventor's dilemma is, have you timed the market with your solution properly? And number one, where is the market? Are people buying what you're doing? What we do is, as a real estate development company, we usually take these types of products and solutions and services from the U.S., bring them into a place like China. And what we do is we give them a market, right? Because when you're talking about a city, we're not talking about one refrigerator, we're talking about 500,000, right? So think of the scale. The problem that they have here in the U.S. is that to try and get the innovation to capture market share is 1 in a million for a lot of different reasons, including lawsuits. I mean, you just if you make a mistake, you're dead, right? So God bless the people that are trying to do a lot of the work here in the U.S. from an innovation standpoint. But what we provide is a secondary way of entering the market, which is do it overseas, and we'll boomerang it back into existing cities to improve the quality of life for the people that actually live here. Well, a case in point would be our work right now in China with autonomous vehicles. We started with electric vehicle buses for public transportation. We're now moved it into autonomous. May 10th of this year, the citizens of Nashville had a referendum in place for a $9 billion tax increase, $9 billion, to put in a streetcar system to improve their transportation issue. Streetcar system for a downtown area, that's going to solve all the problems, because the big problem is everyone lives in suburbs and they're trying to come into the city. Except over the past 10 years, cities now have people living in them, and sometimes the work is in the suburbs. So it's never now a one-way rush hour. It's a two-way rush hour. Look at here in Atlanta. It's a 24-hour-a-day rush hour, right? And it has to do with that, with the demographics of people. So we took a strong look at it and said, well, what we're doing with our new cities in China is that we have a 3-level system. We have a commuter system, so we have a 20-meter bus, so it looks almost like a train, but it's an autonomous vehicle. There's no infrastructure involved, right? We have a 12-meter bus like we see all around here in Atlanta and in Nashville, which are bus stops. But the missing piece was the last mile. How do you get from your home to the suburban train station? Usually that means a parking lot. We didn't want that. And then also, or in and around the city, if your bus stop is far enough away from where you need to be, you need an Uber or something like that, right? So what we did was we created a 2-meter personal pod. Because of that 3-level system, we've now successfully gone beyond testing. We're into safety controls right now that we offered as a solution outside of the streetcar system in Nashville, that the voters of Nashville voted 2-1 to not have the streetcar system that was under development for 5 years and said, that's smarter, that's where we need to be. So a place like Nashville, booming place, up and coming, is going to have the first free public transportation system, all autonomous, all in the next 3 years.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, as an architect, that's kind of weird to be in the transportation business.
Well, you know, but it's...
Elon Musk is doing it wrong. Sorry, Elon.
That is where we are. Paul Doherty, founder and chairman of the Digit Group. It is so cool to be able to sit here and talk with you. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being here. And for those who want to connect with you after this episode, I would say go visit thedigitgroupinc.com. Is that the best place?
That's the best place.
All right, sweet. Well, thank you again so much for being here.
Thank you.